Coming to you live from Paracas in Peru. Hi, I'm Brien Foerster. Can everyone hear me okay? Is the sound working? Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Jenny. It's going great. I wanted to show you some photos to start off because many people have inquired about the possibility, or have there been any forensic reconstructions of the Paracas elongated skull's faces. There have been some very rough ones that have been done in the past, but there's been some absolutely brilliant work done by an American artist called, um, hi, Jack. Oh, great, you're from West Yorkshire. So Marcia K. Moore has done many facial reconstructions of the 2,000 to 3,000-year-old Paracas people. You can look up her website. Just look up Marcia K. Moore, K as in the letter. And so I want to show you some examples of what she's done. So this is some of the work of Marcia. And you can see what she's done is these are computer animations that she's done using a thing called Mudbox. And so I've sent her photographs, and then from the photos, what she's done is she has used this 3D program, and she's done many of these. So here are some other, here are some other examples of the work that she's done. She's not exaggerated the features whatsoever. She simply takes the photos of the skulls and then builds up with this program the muscle and the skin, etc. And as far as I can tell, she's done the best work of anybody so far. Some people have done sketches, which are kind of rough. She doesn't try to be subjective. She tries to be completely objective with this. And then here we have other examples. So you can see this is a three-dimensional work that she's done in order to bring these 2,000 to 3,000-year-old Paracas people back to life. And more examples. So the latest thing she did that was really interesting is that she was lent this Paracas skull. This was a relatively young girl, probably somewhere around 11 years old, because the wisdom teeth have not come in yet. There is no sagittal suture on this. You see the size of the skull is relatively immense. So the cranial volume of this one that she calls cinnamon is larger than normal. Look at the size of the eye sockets. Again, the sagittal suture is not there. And also the foramen magnum, which is where your spinal column enters your skull, is quite far back. So that's a genetic characteristic proving that cinnamon has ancestry which is not what most academics would accept. So what she did is then Joe Taylor, who's a master mold maker in Texas, he made a mold of cinnamon and then produced some resin casts, like exact copies. And one was sent to her. And what she did with cinnamon, rather than doing something with the computer, she physically rebuilt using clay the cinnamon skull. So I know it's a little blurry, but this is her working on it. Again, look at the size of the skull compared to normal. To a shape like that, using cranial deformation would have killed the child. So cinnamon is a great example of what we believe to be a natural elongated skull from Paracas. And then in this photograph, so in this photograph, you see the actual casting of the skull at the bottom. And then that's Marcia. And then that is what her version of what Cinnamon would have looked like when just before she died, somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 years ago. And some people are saying, well, why is the skin so pale? Well, it's because her ancestry, or at least the majority of her ancestry, was not Native American. She was DNA tested, and it showed that her ancestry could very likely have been from the Black Sea, Crimea area, probably from what we call Eurasia. So that means the migration of an ancient people some 3,000 years ago. And I'm going to get into that as well, because it is quite plausible, since the DNA of the Paracas of the coast of Peru, especially the origin ones, the earliest generations, their DNA, mitochondrial DNA, matches that which has been found in the Black Sea, Crimea. And we're going to be going to Crimea in September of 2019 after our tour of Turkey, where we're going to go to Göbekli Tepe and the underground cities of Cappadocia and Istanbul, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to quite extensively cover Turkey, and then right afterwards fly an hour and a half to Crimea. There are direct flights with Turkish Airlines once a day, or actually twice a day. So this is what, again, this is relatively new. This is what Marcia's interpretation of what Cinnamon originally looked like. Now, Cinnamon would have had dark red hair, and dark red hair in general is associated with light-colored skin, because the origin of red hair is from the Eurasia Middle East area. And then a final picture here. This is a comparison of the Cinnamon skull, elongated skull. Again, no sagittal suture. And then that's her impression of what Cinnamon looked like just prior to dying. So that's nobody's done facial reconstruction work like this. Academics just ignore the whole topic. And so that's that. Yes, yes, Jacques, this is an open topic chat. So if you want to start asking me questions, then we'll get into that. And then afterwards, I'm going to show you the possible migration route that these ancient people could very well have taken from the Crimea area to the coast of Peru. Now, again, we don't have all the evidence in, because this is an ongoing process. There are 2 elongated skull samples from 2 different skulls in the laboratory in Canada now, and the testing has already begun with those. So please go ahead and ask questions. Are they race mixed? That we don't know yet. Again, we need to get more DNA testing done, but we do have a connection between Crimea, ancient Crimea, and the ancient coast of Peru at this point. Antarctica coming up again. Well, I think there is a lot of fascination with Antarctica right now, much more than should be, if it's just simply a place where people are monitoring seals and penguins and climate change. So Antarctica is very intriguing, and I look forward to more information. I've actually been invited to go to Antarctica in November, but whether that'll actually turn out or not, I don't know. Of course, you get lots of invitations to go to places, and sometimes those things don't wind up becoming real, but maybe it'll happen. Any evidence of written language from pre-Inca times? Well, the Inca actually had two systems of coded language. They had the Quipu knotted chord system, and they also had the Tokapu system, which was a series of glyphs. And very few people know about that, but if you do come to Cusco at some point, I can show you in the doorway of the Inca Museum, located in Cusco, that they have copies of the Tokapu system for you to look at. The latest DNA results will show up probably in 4 weeks, and I will do YouTube videos about them. And again, it's an ongoing process. We were able to successfully fundraise in order to be able to finance the latest DNA testing. And so the samples are at the lab. I've already gotten notification from the lab that they have started the study of them, but it takes up to 4 weeks before you get actual results. So the results will be emailed to me, and then I'll make a YouTube video about that. And then after that, if the results are successful, then after that, we'll do another fundraising campaign involving another ancient skull, this one located in the highlands of Peru. Some of you may be, actually it's a skeleton. Some of you may be acquainted with it. It's called Waikiki. So we'll do that one. And then there's also a skull very similar to the Star Child skull of Lloyd Pye, located in the Paracas Museum, which is about 15-minute drive from where I am. And so the owner of that private museum has said that we can study that one too, do some DNA studies. So each one's going to involve a GoFundMe campaign. So those are the next two that we'll do. Bosnia and Crimea, I don't know. You'll have to look up a map, like look on Google Maps and compare where Crimea is compared to Bosnia. The most compelling evidence of an ancient civilization, I don't think there was a global civilization. I think there were at least 3 different ancient civilizations. I don't think the constructions that are megalithic in Egypt are the same as those in Peru. I think those are completely different mindsets, 2 different civilizations. And whoever did the work at Pumapunku and Tiwanaku in Bolivia just did that. It was a one-off. So that's what I think, at least 3 different civilizations. Why would there be millions of elongated skulls? There are hundreds in the museum in Lima. There are 45 in the museum in Paracas. And in private collections, there are others. And most major museums in the world do have some elongated skulls from the Paracas culture. So there were thousands of Paracas at one point that did have elongated skulls. They were not the general population. They were the nobility. The general population were simple local human beings. Yes, Felix, it's too late for you to cranially deform your skull. It has to happen at birth. Well, I'm not really concerned with this mainstream concept. This, mainstream academia thinks this and I think that or whatever. I simply present evidence and results. I have had dealings in the past with academics, but they're simply not interested in what I have to say. So I don't care. I don't care about their opinion. What I care about is presenting the evidence I have to the world. And it's up to the world to look at it and see the connections and how the evidence is becoming stronger and stronger as time goes on. Well, the Waikiki DNA, again, Waikiki was tested, and the mitochondrial DNA showed the haplogroup B, which is Native American. But since Waikiki is so bizarrely shaped and compared to a normal human being, the father, the nuclear DNA, has to be something profoundly different. And that's where the idea has to be considered that Waikiki is a alien human hybrid of some kind. So trying to get nuclear DNA is very, very difficult, but I'm going to do my very best in October to get samples of Waikiki. The best place to get the samples from would be the teeth, but I don't want to remove teeth from Waikiki because that damages her appearance. So I'll be able to take marrow from bones, maybe from the ribs. And marrow is the second best form of material to take. Skin supposedly is relatively good as long as it's not too covered in bacteria. Okay, the ancient walls in New Zealand. Well, I've been to the Kaimanawa Wall, and it's hard to tell if it's natural or real. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's in a forest, like very dark forest near Lake Taupo. So someday I'd like to return. It is suspicious in that it's the only formation of its kind in the area. So it may be an artificial wall. And who built it? Likely some ancient pre-Maori culture built it, I would think, because there is evidence that people did exist in New Zealand prior to the main arrival of the Maori. They supposedly had red hair, were relatively tall, and had light-colored skin and green eyes. So that's something else that I'm looking forward to returning to New Zealand to see more about. The megalithic quarries in Japan, I haven't physically been there, but yeah, I've seen compelling evidence. The stuff in Russia, I don't know. Any photos I've sent to geologists say they're natural formations, but you have to physically visit these places. You can't judge simply based on a photo or even a video. You have to actually be there to look at the context. Portugal. Well, I haven't been in Portugal yet, but someday I'd love to. Well, it could be another subspecies of human being. I'm not necessarily saying it's alien, but it could be, it could be alien. It could be another subspecies of human being because the Paracas were a subspecies of human being. They were not Homo sapiens sapiens. There are too many physical characteristics that don't match Homo sapiens sapiens, including, as I said, the large eye sockets and the foramen magnum, which is farther back than where it's supposed to be. How did I first get started on this? I've always had a fascination with ancient culture since I was a kid. And so as an adult, I'm able to travel around a lot and physically see this stuff. That's why I've been to Egypt 6 times and going for the 7th time in April. And we'll be going once a year. And then by 2021, we'll be going twice a year to Egypt because there's so much demand. Our tour for April sold out last month. So that's months ahead of schedule, which is wonderful. Greetings, Poland. I like Nassim Harriman too. I met him in June, and he's a very intelligent man. He's a very nice man too. I'll be joining up with him in Cusco in November. So we'll spend 6 days together with his tour group of something like 100 people. Let's see, elongated skulls of Peru and the Sumerian clay models, or Sumerian, could be. I mean, now we're moving into that area. We're starting to look at the Eurasian area. And as I said, we'll be there in September of next year for the first time. I'll meet up with some of the Russian scientists there and researchers, and we'll see if we can actually see the skulls and skeletons, because we don't know where they are, whether they're on display in museums or if they're hiding away in boxes. That's why you have to go. Yes, I should be on the Joe Rogan podcast. If any of you know Joe, please have him email me or have him look at my site, hiddenincatours.com, because I'd love to be on his podcast. It would be great. Joe Rogan's a very intelligent man. He seems very straightforward, etc. In terms of the megalithic structures being molded instead of cut, I think that could be the case in Peru. It's not the case in Egypt We see the obvious saw marks and drill holes and stuff in Egypt. So the stuff in Egypt was cut using machines that we can understand. Some of the megalithic work, like the polygonal walls in Peru, no, we don't see tool marks. We see that it looks like the matter has actually been altered. That could be heat, that could be some other form of technology. Yes, Joe Rogan, call me, email me. I don't know. Are there any megalithic structures in Morocco? It's a very ancient country, so who knows? If anybody has any photographs or links to ancient places, say in Algeria or Morocco or Tunisia or any of that area, please send them to me. Yes, hold my arc. I'll be joining with Nassim Harriman for 6 days in Peru in November. So far, the only skulls I've been able to study are those that are in Peru and Bolivia. And the only samples we've been able to take so far are from Peru. But again, this is going to be a multi-decade look that we're doing. It's not simply that we did some DNA tests and then we go, oh, well, there are the results. That's the end of the story. It's an ongoing process. The more data you have, the more compelling a story you have. Cambodia, I don't know, maybe at some point. I wouldn't mind going to Angkor Wat, but supposedly it's so overpopulated by tourists that it's somewhat of a nightmare. So that's that's in the distance in terms of time. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to stop the actual. I'm allowed to speak about Egypt, sure. I've got probably hundreds of videos now about Egypt. Supposedly, my first book about lost ancient technology of Egypt has been banned in Egypt, but that what does that mean? It doesn't sell in retail stores in Egypt. You can simply buy the ebook copy, and there you go. Yeah, the long elongated skulls of Malta, they supposedly have been taken off display quite a long time ago. I'd like to go. Thank you, Jesse. Jesse McClung, do you have a question? No, Lee, there's absolutely no interest in my work from academia, and I don't really care anymore. It's not that I wouldn't even say I'm frustrated. It's just it's reached a point where what's the point? What's the point in dealing with the academics? Because most of them that I know are so close-minded that I'm dealing with, like with the elongated skulls, I'm dealing with doctors. And so doctors are the ones, medical professionals are the ones to discuss this stuff with. And quite a few of them, like Dr. Ken from Texas and Dr. Dave from the Caribbean, they're both very fascinated with and want to know more about and be part of what we're doing. Well, the process of the ancient DNA of the Paracas, and thank you, Derek. Who's my biggest inspiration? I guess to start with, it was Thor Heyerdahl and also Graham Hancock. But now there are hundreds of great researchers out there now that I work with. Thank you very much, Austin. Very kind of you. So what I'd like to do now, no, my skull is not elongated. What I'd like to do now is show you some of the places that we're going to be visiting in upcoming months. So please stop with the questions for now. I'm going to show you some pictures and then we'll get back to it. Okay, so next month, as in just a few weeks from now, we're going to be in England. I'm going to a conference in West Yorkshire. Thank you, Shermanator. And recent discoveries at Tiwanaku, please ask that in about 2 minutes. So here we're going to go to Stonehenge. And we get private access to Stonehenge, which is almost impossible, but thanks to Maria Wheatley, we get to visit Stonehenge right inside the fence. And I'm going to be using my little quadcopter that I'm going to pick up next week and fly outside of Stonehenge, get some views of it. You're not allowed to fly inside. Then, of course, we're also going to Avebury with Maria Wheatley, and hopefully I'll be able to use the quadcopter in that area as well. Maybe also Silbury Hill. So that's what's coming up next month. And of course, I'll be filming in 4K to make videos for your entertainment and enjoyment. And then we're doing Peru and Bolivia, the highlands, the coast, Nazca, blah, 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 etc. again in October and then November. And then in February, we're going back to Mexico, to Teotihuacan, etc., focusing on megalithic aspects, because there are megalithic aspects in Mexico, much older than the Olmec civilization. Question is, who did the work? As we always ask whenever we go anywhere. And then we're going back to, as I said, Egypt. Thank you, Aldo. Going back to Egypt in April, and we're going to go back into the Osiris shaft. First level of the Osiris shaft goes into the bedrock 60 feet. Second level, 100 feet. Third level, 30 feet. So it's 200 feet down into the bedrock. Very surreal place. And we'll be there in April of next year. And then what else? And then right after that, we're going back to explore Petra and Little Petra in Jordan again. So, of course, I'm going to be filming that. Quadcopter, maybe. We'll see. Notice I call it a quadcopter, not a drone, because drone has a bad connotation. Quadcopter means this thing that flies with 4 propellers. And then after that, we're going to go to Baalbek in Lebanon. And there have been recent excavations at Baalbek. So we'll see what's going on there. Yes, I am acquainted with Robert Sefer. He and I watch each other's stuff. But we'll see. Well, when we go to Petra, we're also going to another site called Little Petra. It's not little, it's big, and it's part of the Petra complex, but they're separated by a half an hour drive. So the question is, what's in between Petra and Little Petra? We see obvious signs of lost ancient high technology at work, doing the cutting of the flat surfaces of walls. It's undeniable that that was done with lost ancient high technology. And Petra is about 100 times the size you think it is. It goes on for 12 kilometers, so it's huge. Taking empaths to sites, you bet. I'm a bit of an empath myself, and we usually get people who are psychic, and I'm always interested in hearing what they have to say. No, the Earth is not flat. I don't care what anybody says. I find that that theory preposterous. So it's also losing its following too. I mean, that was a big deal like a year or two ago that the Earth is flat, and now I think that's kind of dying out. Kaharuni. No, I've never heard of that place. Yes, the red-headed skulls of Lovelock Cave in Nevada. You bet. There is some evidence. The Smithsonian Institution probably has all of the bones and hair samples, but you never know. Other stuff might turn up. The fallen angels. I don't know. I guess it's possible. I mean, Mount Hermon is quite close to Baalbek in Lebanon. You drive past it, and it's kind of a creepy-looking mountain. But we will be going to Israel maybe next year, and I want to see the megalithic stuff that is in Jerusalem and speak with local biblical experts about subjects such as the Nephilim, etc. Hi, Shermanator. I don't know about that. They have done GPR scans, but that doesn't mean that they're going to do any excavations at Tiwanaku. They haven't done much there for quite a while. They've actually buried some of the ancient megalithic work at Tiwanaku. So there's a hesitancy to do excavations at Tiwanaku and Pumapunku because they're such bizarre places. You never know. Maybe they'll do more excavations, but I'm not holding out. We will be there in October, so I'll get to see what's the latest. We were just there in June. Nothing was going on. Sure, Jaybird, sounds great. Go ahead and send me a Praveen Mohan. Yeah, actually, he and I are in communication together. We were going to go to India in January of next year, but we postponed it until January of 2020. And so I'm hoping to meet up with Praveen, and because he does really brilliant videos. Since he lives in India, of course, he has access to all of these great ancient locations. He's shown obvious examples of machine marks on columns, etc. So it's clear that there was an advanced civilization in India many, many, many thousands of years ago. So that'll be fascinating. It's just India is a hell of a long way from Peru. So that'll mean flying stage by stage. We'll probably fly from Peru to the US, and then the US maybe to Germany, and then Germany to India. But I'm looking forward to it, definitely. The Ireland Egyptians. Yes, there are stories that Egyptians did make it to Ireland in the distant past. I think somewhere around 500 BC or something like that. How would an independent anthropologist get a copy of the DNA results? The best thing to do, honestly, is to buy my book, Beyond the Black Sea. That's the book about the Paracas culture that contains all of the DNA evidence. I know I have released videos about the DNA results, and so that's the best way, because the process did cost $100,000 and we have to recoup the money. We can't simply give that information, like the raw data, away and the descriptions for free, because there are also copyright considerations. L.A. Marzulli believes he has the copyright on the DNA results, which I don't agree with, but I did publish the results themselves in my book, Beyond the Black Sea, which you can find at Amazon in both ebook and also paperback form. LA, no. Actually, LA Marzulli and I have fallen out. And I don't want to get into the details. Nothing really personal. It's just that I think that I'm following the results of the DNA study that we did in a more scientific way. Again, because the indications are that there's a connection between Crimea from 3,000 years ago and Paracas in Peru from about 2,800 years ago. So it could have taken them as much as 200 years to make it from Crimea to the coast of Peru. Why they bothered going to the coast of Peru is something I'm still working on. But here, if we can stop the questions here for a moment, I'd like to show you my latest theory about the possible migration route from Crimea to the coast of Peru. Now, again, I don't know why. We do know the DNA is connected, so let's have a look at that. So here you see Crimea, which is here. That's where the skeleton of a baby between 1.5 and 2 years was found, died about 2,000 years ago. And if you look at the wind currents, you could make it easily to the Bosporus at Istanbul. And from the Bosporus is where you could sail into the Mediterranean. So it is, if you were a good maritime people and people living around the Black Sea area, especially since this baby skeleton was found literally hundreds of feet from the Black Sea itself, these people would have been master mariners of the Black Sea, which would be a very difficult body of water to sail on, because supposedly the weather can be just absolutely horrific there. So from the Black Sea, you then enter the Mediterranean. And from the Mediterranean, you go down here and through, and you can make it here to the coast of Egypt, somewhat close to Alexandria, that area, or Port Said, because the prevailing currents and winds can take you there. And then from there, from May to October, once you enter, actually, the Red Sea, I used to say the Persian Gulf. Now it looks more like it's the Red Sea. Then from May to October, the winds and currents pull you out of the Red Sea into the Indian Ocean area. And then from there, if you look here, this is where you're catching another current this way, like that. That's the Red Sea. And then you catch what's called the counter-equatorial current, and that pulls you towards the Pacific. And then from there, once you make it through Indonesia, then you could catch the equatorial countercurrent that takes you to the coast of Ecuador. And that's what we see here. This countercurrent takes you to the coast of Ecuador, like that. And either you wind up going back, which you don't want to go, or you go up this way. And then from there, because I live in Paracas, Peru, I know that the prevailing winds here on the coast of Peru, 80% of the time, the wind and current blows from the south to the north. And so that way, you could make it from Peru to Ecuador. And we have lots of artifacts in the Paracas period from Ecuador. And then 20% of the time, the wind blows south from Ecuador down the coast of Peru. And so I think that's what the Paracas did. Again, it's a theory that I'm working on. That map concept I actually came up with yesterday. So I think that's the plausible route. Again, why they bothered to go so far, halfway around the world, I don't know. But the DNA evidence is indicating that. And that's what we're... Richard Clark, red-headed white people lived in Japan long before the Orientals. That's news to me. Supposedly, ancient red-haired people lived on Easter Island before the Polynesians, and ancient red-haired people lived in Tahiti before the Polynesians, and ancient red-haired people supposedly lived in Hawaii before the Polynesians, possibly even the west coast of Canada. So this whole thing about ancient red-haired seafaring people, and we're not talking necessarily Phoenicians, we're maybe talking from the Middle East, is interesting. Oh, the Ainu of Japan. Well, interesting. A lodge ring? No, this is the scarab. This is the Kepler beetle, which is the symbol of one of the stages of the sun in ancient Egyptian belief. Most people think that the Egyptian name of the sun was Ra, but that's only one of 5 stages of the sun. So you have Kepler, then you have Ra, then you have Un, then you have Aten, then you have Amen. And those correspond with 5 different stages of the day. Yes, if there are any living elongated skull people, we could do DNA testing of them. My wife and I did see a man in Egypt, in Cairo, who had a huge elongated head, but we saw him when we were stuck in traffic. And then a photograph was taken of a man in Nazca with a very large elongated head. It might be possible to test the blood or test the DNA of some of the Melanesian people, as well as the people of the Congo. This is ongoing, but again, this is a multi-decade thing that I'm looking at doing, so who knows what'll come up. Yes, I do view the Ancient Architects channel very much so. He and I are in contact with each other. If you saw his latest video about Baalbek, one mistake he made that I pointed out to him is that the stone of the pregnant woman was not moved from somewhere else. It's actually still attached to the bedrock. So he admitted that he'd never been there, and he's of a good scientific mind. So I'll be filming more in April of next year at Baalbek to be able to get more detail. The Baalbek site is actually quite immense. Most people just think of the giant stones, but Baalbek itself is a very complex complex. And of course, you can see those videos on my YouTube channel. Actually, my DNA is being tested right now, along with the Paracas samples that were sent to the Canadian lab to make sure that I haven't contaminated the samples. And if my DNA shows up in those samples, then they can simply deduct that from what else they find. And so that's an important point. No, I'm not interested in cloning any of the Paracas skulls. Sorry, that's a little bit much. Did ancient Egypt contact America? Well, of course, they have found cocaine, or at least coca, in some of the mummies of ancient Egypt. They've also found tobacco. Coca comes from Bolivia and Peru, and tobacco has been traditionally grown in Peru and Bolivia and the southern U.S. for thousands of years. So it's possible. I think that there was a lot more maritime movement than what most academics will accept. We're talking lots of different people moving the world's oceans, not necessarily all around the planet, but some people would go from one area to another. For example, there is a native lady who lives in New Zealand who is a pre-Maori ancestry, and she had her DNA tested. She's 30% Persian. So it's quite possible that the so-called Rongo text or glyph language found on Easter Island goes from originally the Indus Valley or that area. Did Egyptians make it to the Grand Canyon? I honestly don't know. That area is completely off limits. I've never been to the Grand Canyon. David Hatcher Childress, of course, believes that there was some presence of the Egyptians in the Grand Canyon, but I don't know. Yes, Shermanator, the 12,000-year-old stalactites are located in a very small, or actually a shaft at Tiwanaku, right on top of the Akapana Pyramid. So what I suggest is you go or come with us to Tiwanaku, or if you go to Bolivia when I'm not there, then you can contact Antonio Portugal. He's located on Facebook. He's a very famous author in La Paz, and he's written several books, and he's the one that actually was part of the scientific study that discovered this shaft, including the stalactites. I think there's stalactites, yeah. And they also found one giant chamber using ground-penetrating radar at Tiwanaku, but they haven't been able to do any excavating there because of control, I guess, from the government of Bolivia. The Haida have unique DNA? I didn't know that. I'm actually in good contact with Gujau, who's the leader of the Haida Nation. So I'd love to have some of their elders' DNA tested. Maybe eventually, when I get to Haida Gwaii, I can do that and see if they can volunteer. All they have to give is a swab from inside their mouth. They don't have to have blood taken out of them. Hello, Hayden. Egyptologists don't think anything of me. I don't have much contact with them. I don't agree with, I think most of them have very limited ways of looking at things. So supposedly stone testing has been done by Russians at Sacsayhuaman. They found that the surface of the stone appears to have been heated by at least 1,000 to 2,000 degrees Celsius. No, I don't think the Paracas were the Nephilim, but I don't know. Would have to have Nephilim DNA in order to be able to compare. And as far as I know, nobody has any Nephilim DNA. Zahi Hawass, I don't know the man. I'm not really interested in meeting with him because I don't think he's a very progressive scientist whatsoever. There are other experts in Egypt that we're starting to meet who are much more interesting to me to discuss. That's right, Andrew. Yusuf Awiyan is one of the experts in Egypt. Yusuf Awiyan of the Awiyan family. His father was the great Abdel Hakim, and so if you want a good guide, if you go to Egypt, Yusuf Awiyan is a great person to hire. I don't know Salima Ikram, but then again, I've only been to Egypt 6 times. I'll be going at least once a year from now on. Yes, I have tried ayahuasca on more than one occasion. It's been very beneficial to me. I don't, well, about the Chachapoya, I haven't been to Chachapoya yet. It's not that far from where we are, but we're planning on that maybe early next year. Chachapoya is in the high jungle in central Peru, and the supposed warriors or cloud warriors used to live there in Inca and pre-Inca times. So yes, I did do ayahuasca, Casey, twice. Yes, very much considering LiDAR. It's hard to get technology like that in Peru. That's something I would have to bring from the US, and we have to wait until the price of it goes down like anything. It's like you don't simply go out there and buy the latest toy or equipment or technology. You have to wait until it drops down to a reasonable price. I think the Smithsonian is hiding lots of stuff, but the great thing is now, because of the internet and because of cell phone technology, etc., we can make discoveries and spread them out to the world much faster than we could in the past. So what is in the past is in the past. What is hidden probably will remain hidden. But well, a LiDAR drone at $60,000, I don't think so. It'll come down. Yeah, the woman using the satellites to discover ancient places, I'm going to be putting contact with her to get access to the mapping of Peru, supposedly. I haven't heard, that's a story I heard a couple of weeks ago. I haven't heard back about that yet, but we'll see. Yes, if I'm on the Joe Rogan podcast, I will describe some of my ayahuasca experience, but I'm not going to tell the whole story because you're honestly not supposed to. You're not supposed to tell all of a mystical experience because that's just what the people who I did ayahuasca with said. They said that is part of your power, so you should maintain much of the story, but I can release some of it. I don't know if a secret room has been discovered at Machu Picchu. Maybe. They're not doing any excavation there now, so I don't know. Machu Picchu, I don't know if they'll find much more. there are other locations in Peru that will be much more interesting in the future. When I did ayahuasca, yes, I vomited. I projectile vomited. It was actually a very pleasant feeling. I was getting rid of old stuff in me, not just physically, but also on a psychic and spiritual level. So for me, ayahuasca was great. So once again, if any of you know how to contact Joe Rogan, will you please have him contact me? I'd love to be on his show. So here is there is my website, not just for Joe Rogan, but for any of you. I don't know anything about ancient Egypt yet, or sorry, I know a lot about ancient Egypt. I don't know anything about ancient India, or not too much yet. But since we're going in January of 2020, I will do my research because I've got more than a year to study stuff. And again, that guy Praveen, who has the YouTube channel, is a very, very bright guy. I don't know if Joe Rogan won't be nice to me. I can stand up for myself. Okay, I want to thank you once again. We've been on for about 51 minutes, and I want to thank all of you from all over the world for participating in this. Thank you for subscribing, and I hope to do this from the US in about a week, and then I hope to do this again, maybe from England, maybe do some live stuff from Stonehenge if I can get a chip for my phone, which should be pretty simple. We've got great cell networks and stuff in England. So this, just to show you, for those who have not seen, this is not a real skull. This is a resin copy, but it's a perfect resin copy made by Joe Taylor at Mont Blanco Museum in, I think, Crosbyton in Texas. You can see the suture here, but you see there is no suture there. And this was about a 7-year-old child. So that's why when people say the skulls look really small, some of the ancient Paracas died when they were really quite young. So this is an example. This is, I count the teeth. Yeah, so this is maybe a 7 or 9 month old Paracas. Unfortunately, the lower jaw we don't have. But there are the 2 holes in the back of the head that are genetic. That's actually, I think, maybe a third one, or it might be a flaw in the mold. But anyway, that's a mold or a copy. So thank you once again so much. I'm glad that so many of you enjoy these live podcasts or these live streaming events. I'm going to have to do some more of these because you seem to like them. And also, I'm running out of video from traveling. So I have a couple of other ones coming up. I have 9 videos on YouTube or Amazon Prime now, which are all more than an hour and are in 4K. So if you look up Brien Foerster videos on Amazon, you can see those. And a new one will be uploaded probably within the week. So from Paracas in Peru, here's a replica of a Paracas ceramic of a puma. It's not the real thing, it's a copy. But again, thank you so much from all over the planet. I'm glad you enjoy these chats with us. And I'll do this more often since this seems to be the best way to transmit information to people. Making a video from footage that I film is one thing, but having an interactive experience like this is great. And so blessings to all of you. Here's another puma from Paracas in Peru.